Cleveland Browns superstar Myles Garrett requests a trade. The NFC North looks like a good landing spot. I'll break it down on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready. Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome into the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert Lauren Cox. On today's episode, we're going to tell you what it would look like for the Kansas City Chiefs to lose, what it would look like for the Philadelphia Eagles to lose the Super Bowl. But we got to start with the biggest story in the NFL. Myles Garrett has requested a trade from the Cleveland Browns. We'll go over some of the best landing spots for Flash Garrett. Before we get into it, though, do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Lauren, after the major NBA trade news over the weekend, the NFL says, hold my beer. All right, I got something for you too. And we get the news that Myles Garrett is asking out of Cleveland, and we go to Locked On Browns to break down the big news.
Well, Cleveland, here I was getting ready to record Monday's episode of Locked On Browns, and all of a sudden, we get a bombshell of a story. Myles Garrett has officially requested a trade out of Cleveland. This changes the math on quite literally everything. I've been talking about trading back. I've been talking about, people are having their conversations about whether or not to draft a quarterback, what to do with that position. And Myles, it seemed like, had been sort of sold on the idea that they could figure this thing out and find the right quarterback and move forward with that guy. Now all of a sudden, if Myles Garrett wants out, I think blowing it up is the only path forward. I will be talking about that exclusively on today's episode of the podcast. You can find it coming up a little bit here this afternoon. Man, what news on a Monday during the offseason. Never a dull moment here in Cleveland. Can't wait to talk about it with you, Cleveland.
Well, here's the thing. I think the Browns need to blow it up anyway, and Myles Garrett knows that. And it's funny to me that earlier in the offseason, Myles Garrett was like, I want to sit down with the Browns and see their vision in the future. And then we get this. So I guess he didn't like what he heard.
Yeah, it seems weird to me. Like, Myles Garrett has pushed through so many bad times in Cleveland that, like, this is the time. Like, I get it. Trust me. Like, it's bad in Cleveland. I'm not saying, like, that he should be happy there right now, but, like, they seem to at least be reaching some sort of eventual conclusion of the Deshaun Watson era here in the near future. Like, this is the time when they're turning a corner. You think they're going to start to turn a corner. Shouldn't you want to see this part through if you already saw the other previous errors through?
Yeah, and I mean, maybe what we think on the outside that they are pushing through the Deshaun Watson era and all that, maybe that's not what they're advising behind closed doors. That's something to consider. But either way, the Browns say they're not going to trade him. Myles Garrett wants a trade. This thing can fester. If they do facilitate a trade for Myles Garrett, my number one destination, and Lauren, hold your ears. I know that this isn't going to be fun, but my number one trade destination is the Green Bay Packers. All right. I think the Packers need an elite level player on the defensive side of the ball. It's a very good roster, but they need more superstars. And I will tell you one thing. This reminds me of the Reggie White trade. When the Packers went out and traded for Reggie White at the beginning of the Brett Favre era, that turned them into a perennial Super Bowl threat. They win a Super Bowl. They get to a second where they lose. I think this could be that Reggie White final piece for the Green Bay Packers to turn them into a serious contender. And the Packers have been a very good team the last few years. Their draft picks are usually in the 20s, if not the late 20s. I think giving up multiple first-round picks here, maybe a first-round pick this year, a third-round pick, a second-round pick next year to add in. I think a package like that to the Green Bay Packers, he's already used to the cold weather. It's a properly run organization. They have a quarterback in place. I think that would make a ton of sense for the Packers.
Yeah, I'm with you there 100%. A team that's been so good at, like, drafting and developing has kept a lot of price tags down. Like, yeah, they're paying Jordan Love, but there's not a lot of other, like, big name stars that they're having to sink a ton of money in. I mean, they signed Xavier McKinney,
Right.
et cetera, but there's a nice real spot there for him on that Packers roster. I can't help but throw in, boy, Chicago Bears with a young quarterback who's on a rookie contract, and Caleb Williams
Yeah.
would also be a fun name there. But I mean, we talk about teams that can afford to bring Myles Garrett in. If I'm Mike Vrabel in the New England Patriots, go get me my star pass rusher to launch my career. Still have a lot of cap space with Drake May as a rookie quarterback. Like, I
Right.
know they're not right away Super Bowl contenders or anything, but like,
Right.
that's the kind of-
That's the problem.
I'm coming in and I'm putting my stamp on this team because I'm Mike Vrabel. That Belichick guy is in the past now. This is going to be my team and how I'm going to do it.
Well, that would be an incredible bet on Mike Vrabel from Myles Garrett because, again, one of the things that a lot of teams that have cap space are a lot of teams that aren't very good. So it's like if he's leaving the Browns because he wants to contend right away and win, selling the New England Patriots would be difficult, I think. But they definitely do have the space to do it. And Mike Vrabel would probably be motivated to get a veteran in there. I think another team that does this all the time is the Los Angeles Rams. If you want to go make one more push, last couple of years with Matt Stafford, you go get Myles Garrett. Think you include, what if we do Jared Verse and a first-round pick? Would the Rams even do that? Or would the Rams say, no, the value of Jared Verse on the rookie contract? What if they add in, their first-round pick this year? They haven't made a first-round pick in so long. I'm trying to give it away already. But you take, last year, of course, they took Jared Verse. But you give away your first-round pick this year if you're the Rams. You package some other mid-round picks, and you make that splash move to really take you to the next level on defense. I think that would be a good option. Honestly, any team in the NFC North, the Vikings make a big splash. Now you have J.J. McCarthy on the rookie deal. You look at the Lions, add that big-time pass rusher, get Aiden Hutchinson back. We're going all in, even though we lost our coordinators. Like, I could see any of those teams. Is there any other team that caught your eye? I think the AFC may be a harder sell, but is there a team in the AFC or maybe just another team in general that you're looking at?
Yeah, I thought you were going to steal this one from me, but the Los Angeles Chargers, I think, are really interesting here because
yes,
Mac coming off of the books now, and
right.
He and Joey Bosa have obviously been a really fun pairing, but Mac hasn't been the same Khalil Mack he was earlier in his career. Still very good, but like to add Myles Garrett into that with Jim Harbaugh in that defense to kind of take them to the next level and pair that extra superstar pass rusher on the opposite side from Justin Herbert. I mean, obviously they've got, bigger concerns that they need to address, but sometimes just adding that sort of superstar playmaker on defense can elevate that side and maybe make Herbert's job a little bit easier.
It's funny that you mentioned Khalil Mack here because the last time we saw a trade of this magnitude with an edge rusher was Khalil Mack, where there was a first-round pick and multiple firsts in that draft or in that trade. So it's interesting that that's the connection that you make there.
Yeah, that definitely hits close to home. I mean, haven't seen the Bears go through that trade there. It's a difficult transition for a franchise to kind of say like, listen, we had a great run and the fan base doesn't want to see him go, but at some point you have to look at yourself organizationally and say, if we're not ready to compete right now, we can't be committing this kind of money to that player when it's still going to be a 2 or 3 year window, and at least get some draft picks in return to try and rebuild and get some younger players in there. It kind of sucks, but it's part of the team building process in the NFL.
And regardless of what the Browns do this offseason, whether it be drafting a quarterback with number 2, whether it be signing a veteran, it would be hard to sell to Myles Garrett that they're ready to compete for championships right away. So regardless of what the Browns do, I have a hard time seeing them satisfying Myles Garrett, but ultimately they have him on their roster, so they get to choose. But there are definitely some great pairings out there that we've identified that would make for some interesting stuff with Myles Garrett. But with that being said, it's Super Bowl time. How do these teams lose the game? We're going to tell you what we're looking for. It's Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, PrizePicks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. Here's how it works. You pick more or less on at least 2 players' projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. PrizePicks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw for 1 yard to win. So pair that with maybe more on Travis Kelce receiving yards, and you're already cashing out. What I love the most is fast, safe withdrawals. When I win, my cash is in my account in as little as 15 minutes. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. It's PrizePicks. Run your game. All right, Lauren, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about good landing spots for Myles Garrett after his bombshell trade request with the Cleveland Browns. Now I want to get back into Super Bowl week. We got a lot to discuss with the big game ahead. What I want to talk about is what it would look like for these teams to lose. So if the Kansas City Chiefs were to lose this Super Bowl to the Philadelphia Eagles, what exactly would it look like? And I think you go back to an old school game plan, in my opinion, Lauren, what underdogs have used for centuries and centuries to beat the favorite, what David has used to beat Goliath. Of course, it starts with the turnover battle.
Turnovers. You have to get turnovers. You can't suffer from multiple turnovers. You can't have the fumble that Jalen Hurts had in the Super Bowl that went for a Chiefs touchdown. You can't allow for a massive special teams play like Kadarius Toney had in the fourth quarter. That return, that's when the game really flipped. That's when it felt like, okay, this is probably over. The Chiefs are going to get this done. Like those big time moments, especially late in the game, you got to find a way. You got to find a way to win in those moments.
So obviously my guy Louie there, who was on the show yesterday from Locked On Eagles, looking at the things that they have to do well here, and that starts with turnovers, in my opinion. The Chiefs have been a bit turnover prone, obviously more turnover prone in the regular season in spots. But for the Eagles to get more possessions, to keep Patrick Mahomes off the field, to give their offense and their passing game, which has been inconsistent throughout the year, they need to win that turnover battle to give them those extra possessions. I think that's a critical juncture for the Eagles to pull off this upset.
Yeah, that's actually something I was going to bring up separate from Louis in this episode. Is like, it feels to me like this Eagles defense has been particularly turnover dependent in the last few weeks.
Yes.
They've played well regardless of the turnovers, but like they got 4 against the Commanders, 2 against the Rams, 4 against the Packers. And then even late in the regular season, they got 4 against the Cowboys and needed 5 against the Commanders to even stay in that game that they lost. And Kansas City, to their credit, like has really taken better care of the ball lately. I think they've had
Tighten the screws.
One turnover since Thanksgiving, I think, is what the Chiefs offense produced. So, like, yes, the Eagles
defense, and it was bad early in the year too. They had, Patrick Mahomes was leading the NFL in interceptions for a little while.
They found a way to sort of take care of the ball. So if the Eagles can't steal those extra possessions and Mahomes can keep kind of working his way up and down the field there, like, yeah, I don't think it's going to be some easy performance by any means, but like it puts a lot more of that pressure on Jalen Hurts to have to be the guy and go the length of the field as opposed to getting the ball near midfield and having these shorter drives that you're almost guaranteed a field goal at least.
Well, I think you're 100% right, and you're kind of knocking on the next door to walk through. And to me, it's Jalen Hurts has to raise his game. We've seen Jalen Hurts in big games do special things. Like he has the playmaking ability to be a special player and make the big plays in the big moments. But if he plays the way that he's played for the majority of this year and being an afterthought and just, the guy who hands off to Saquon Barkley, he has not played his best football this year for much of the year. He's had little flashes here and there, but the consistency has not been there. If he doesn't make a few special plays to kind of balance out what Patrick Mahomes is naturally going to do, then I think the Eagles don't really have a chance to win. So Jalen Hurts if I had to identify one player that obviously you could do Saquon, but I really think it's Jalen Hurts that if he plays well, that will lead to Kansas City losing the game.
Yeah, I'm interested in like how this works with picking up blitzes from the Chiefs against Steve Spagnuolo. Hurts is a quarterback who holds onto the ball a little longer than other quarterbacks, especially when he's under pressure, he's going to try and get out of the pocket and escape and extend those plays. But he's higher up on the list of quarterbacks in terms of pressure converting into sacks. Like we know how good the Eagles offensive line is in terms of pass protection. So if the Chiefs are rushing 4, he can sit in there and pick apart the defense. But if Spagnuolo, as we've seen in previous Super Bowls, dials up that blitz a little bit, and then as good as your offensive line is, if you just have more rushers than blockers, somebody's got to get free, and Hurts has to make good, quick decisions with those balls. We've seen him do it sometimes, but can he do it consistently over the course of a Super Bowl? That's what you're talking about with raising his level of play.
Yeah, 100%. And look, we talk about the big plays that he'll have to make, but the drive-to-drive consistency will be key too, like just converting those third and shorts opportunities that they're going to get because of the run game. And going back to Louis talked about this, like time of possession and Saquon Barkley being able to hold on to the ball. That's another big key that could doom the Kansas City Chiefs if they let the Eagles dominate possession.
How to beat the Kansas City Chiefs? How do you stop Pat Mahomes? Keep him off the football field. Don't give him the ball. Don't give your defense an opportunity to stop them in the fourth quarter, because odds are 99% of the time, Pat Mahomes is going to get it done. So having Saquon Barkley this time around instead of Miles Sanders, I mean, it's obvious what an upgrade that is. And Miles Sanders in 2022, we all know he was a really good player. Had over 1,200 rushing yards in the season, was great in the NFC Championship, but averaged under 3.5 yards a carry in that Super Bowl. He struggled. The run game, outside of Jalen Hurts making plays impromptu outside of structure, was non-existent. So Pat Mahomes, he got a lot of opportunities to move the football in that game. Having Saquon winning the time of possession battle, especially if you can build up a lead early in this game, if you can start fast the way the offense has been doing over the last month, and you can avoid the slow starts of the early regular season, it's a game changer.
Yeah, again, I've been making the joke, but it's the old school classic football game plan when you're an underdog. You got to get turnovers. You got to run the football. You got to hold time of possession and keep the other more talented offense off the field. Now, I wouldn't say position by position that, the Chiefs are the more talented offense here. Outside of quarterback, it probably goes to the Eagles, but you understand the philosophy of with Patrick Mahomes, they become the more talented offense regardless of all the other positions. So holding the ball, leaning on what you do best, your defense, your run game, that's been I find it funny that setting up my pick for later in the week, this NFL season has been about the cyclical change of the run game and defense and how offenses are now adjusting to how defenses adjusted a couple of years ago when it was 54-51 Rams Chiefs. I find it funny that the team that does defense and run game the best this year is a team that has a chance to end the three-peat. I'm just teasing my thoughts for the end of the week, but that's interesting that's where we're at.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see, like, is that enough to overcome the Mahomes thing? Like, yes, the league is trending in this direction, but like,
right.
That hasn't stopped Patrick Mahomes the last 2 seasons. Like, the Super Bowl has not been decided by, low scoring defense, take care of the football kind of games. Like, it's had to be Patrick Mahomes and hero ball and throwing up and down the field. And like, is this the breaking point? Is this where the balance of power shifts and everyone says, oh wait, actually, that Eagle, or does Mahomes keep pushing through? And you say, well, yeah, defensive running game is great, but still having that quarterback in the big passing game is ultimately what actually has still won.
Yep. It's an interesting conversation about roster versus elite quarterback. Like, there's so many narratives within it. It's great. But if Kansas City loses the game, it will be Jalen Hurts making some big plays, holding the ball at time of possession, and getting some turnovers. But we're going to look at the other side of this thing. What's it look like for the Eagles to lose this game? And, obviously it's not quite as complicated. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Are you looking for tickets to your next big event? Maybe you're rolling in the dough. You want some last minute tickets to the big game next week. Whether it's a concert, a comedy show, or a sports game, finding the right ticket at the right price can be a headache. But with Gametime Picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Gametime Picks, the app does all the hard work for you. It curates the best deals so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. I've been using Gametime Picks for a while. I absolutely love it. You get a panoramic view from your seat, which is a game changer as well. Before I even hit buy, I'll see exactly what I'm looking at when I go to the venue. It's so reassuring. They have their lowest price guarantee as well. Ready to make your next event even better? Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. It's last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, Lauren, we're going to cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about trading spots for Myles Garrett. We talked about what it would look like for Kansas City to lose this Super Bowl. But now I want to talk about what it would look like on the Philadelphia Eagles side. Before we do, thanks again for making Locked On NFL your first listen and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed for free year-round NFL content, and check out the afternoon edition of Locked On NFL. It is a double dose of NFL content with Tony Wiggins hosting the show in the barbershop. But with that being said, I think there is one major key for the Kansas City Chiefs that if that box is checked, it might be difficult for the Eagles to win. And it's the outside distractions. I think that the reality here is the Chiefs are healthy. They're a good team. There's very little on the football field that I'm significantly concerned about. So for me, if Kansas City doesn't have any distractions this week and they keep their focus normal and have a normal week with nothing off the field, no media conspiracies, no anything like that, they'll probably be in a great position to win the game. And my guys over at Locked On Chiefs talked about how they're in a really good spot on that front.
I'm glad that it was a very low-key weekend for the Kansas City Chiefs. They got through their last practice Friday. The only questionable designation for anyone is Sky Moore, who's still on IR, so you're not losing anything. Nothing affects the 53. In this case, quiet is good, right?
Quiet is extremely good. Go back to 3 times that they've won the Super Bowl. It's been quiet. The one time they lost, it was not. And that was a whole nother issue, but reality is reality. I mean, all you want this time of year is for quiet. You want your team to be your team. You want your team to, take responsibility for what they're doing, keep their eye focused on what they're doing, and understand they're less than a week away from playing in one of the biggest. I would love to say, here's the problem. You can't really say it's the biggest game of most of their lives because a lot of the rosters played in several of them.
Right? Just the most recent biggest game of their lives.
So I don't think that there's a ton of pressure on them because they've been in this situation so much. And as long as there is no, don't give the Eagles bulletin board material or anything like that. I think if the Kansas City Chiefs are able to play with no distractions and get to the game with no big media story or bulletin board material, it's going to be hard for the Eagles to pull off an upset.
I'm with you there. I think having the continuity across this team is so valuable from the coaching staff down in the roster. But the one spot that's interesting for me there is yes, okay, all these guys are used to the Taylor Swift stuff and the stuff outside noise, except for all 4 of Patrick Mahomes' top 4 wide receivers. None of these guys have been here for previous Super Bowls. DeAndre Hopkins comes over in the trade, Hollywood Brown, a free agent, Xavier Worthy, draft pick, and of course, Juju Smith-Schuster added late in that process. These are all guys that have not been here for the previous Super Bowl runs. Not that one position is going to be the thing that could get distracted and derail things, but when one of those kind of lingering Chiefs question marks is who's the go-to playmaker if Travis Kelce's covered, who's going to make that play? Those next options are all guys that haven't been through this process before and haven't been to Super Bowls and haven't played with Patrick Mahomes on these biggest stages. And that's just one of the laundry list of things where it's hey, the Chiefs will probably figure out a way to make it work, but there's questions.
Yeah, there is questions, but I guess even with the natural questions, I think that isn't enough to hurt the Chiefs in a significant way. So the only thing, in my opinion, that could hurt the Chiefs in a significant way would be some big story. A player goes out and, commits a crime, or some coach or field official does something really dumb out in the public, some sort of scandal. As long as Kansas City doesn't have to, because if they don't have anything weighing on them in any significant way, they're just too clear-headed and too focused. So I know that's not an on-the-field thing, but that's something that I'm thinking about. The next thing that I'm really looking at here is the Eagles will lose this one if they weren't prepared for anything, because Kansas City has shown that they will adjust the game plan. They will have specialty plays to attack certain things, and a disadvantage that the Eagles have here is the Chiefs have kind of been a brand new offense here in recent weeks. And our guys from Locked On Chiefs explain that advantage.
Because the reality is they haven't had this offense all season. they started getting the offense in the playoffs, basically, or the last week before before they got to, against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So you don't have, weeks and weeks and weeks of stuff that you can go pull from. Because not only did you get Marquise Brown back, but you also got Isaiah Pacheco back. And the same goes for having Xavier Worthy and Marquise Brown and DeAndre Hopkins on the field at the same time. They don't have enough plays that they've run that the Eagles are going to have a great idea as to what they're going to do in every situation. They have some ideas, but I guarantee you they're going to have specific plays designed to beat this Eagles team. Because remember, you go back, Corn Dog was designed to beat that Eagles defense, and it was a perfect play. Find something you can take advantage of, and it doesn't have to be something that you're going to run 5 times. It just has to be something that when you get in that situation, oh, this is going to be a touchdown. This is going to work. This is going to be perfect. This is exactly what we want.
If the Chiefs have no off-field distractions and the Eagles defense isn't ready to adjust on the fly to what they see from the offense of the Chiefs, I think the Eagles are in a bad spot and probably lose.
Yeah, I think back to the last Super Bowl between these two teams where Patrick Mahomes isn't sacked a single time. Like the pass rush, being able to get home at Patrick Mahomes, the Chiefs find ways to adapt and adjust. And if they need to get rid of the ball out of Mahomes' hands super quickly and go to some screens and some quick throws, they'll do that. If they need to move the pocket, they'll do that. Like there's only so much you can actually do to prepare for this Kansas City offense. And then even if that's the other thing, even if you guess right and you're like, we know what they're going to do, the Patrick Mahomes factor just changes it, because whatever the Chiefs plan, whatever the Eagles plan, he'll break from both of those plans, his own plans, and there's no preparing for what's going to happen next.
Yeah, it's going to be tough to deal with that. So having a good enough plan may still not be good enough, but if you're not prepared and then Patrick Mahomes start doing Patrick Mahomes things, then you're definitely going to lose. So that's kind of what we're seeing from both of those sides. Is there anything additionally you'd like to add on this Eagles lose side of things?
Yeah, I mean, I just think about a little bit what we talked about earlier, but this idea of like the Chiefs run defense and Saquon Barkley, right? We talk about trying to keep Patrick Mahomes off of the field by the Eagles being able to run the ball. Like if Kansas City can load up the box and keep that time of possession balanced, I mean, that's how the Chiefs win this game, right? That's the variable here of like, man, if Kansas City can just run the ball, control the clock forever, like you're going to be feeling pretty good. You're going to be feeling pretty good if you're an Eagles fan. But like, man, if Kansas City can just kind of load up and take away that Saquon Barkley factor, like that can change everything. Even if Jalen Hurts plays well, you're still giving the ball back to Patrick Mahomes, and that's the ultimate downfall.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how Kansas City approaches the run defense. They've been susceptible lately. So, I mean, that's definitely something to consider. And that's part of the time of possession, conversation that we had with the Eagles in the previous segment is, if you could stop the run, then you ruin all of that. And it just totally upsets the apple cart for the Eagles. But Lauren, I'm going to get you out of here on this. Who wins?
Saquon Barkley, Super Bowl MVP, and the Eagles stop the three-peat from Kansas City.
There we go. I love hearing it.
Your luck has to run out at some point, right? I mean, like the Chiefs, we talk about like the biggest question marks for the Chiefs. There's question marks all over this team, and yet no one thinks they're going to lose because they just always find a way. But like eventually that has to stop. And this Eagles team feels built as best as anyone could be to try and stop them. And yet I know I'm going to look like a fool a week from now when Mahomes gets the ball with a minute left and drives down for the game.
It's definitely a possibility, but we'll figure that out a week from now. But I love it. Love hearing it. And that's going to do it for us today here on the Locked On NFL podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland, the Madman, with Lauren Cox. Thanks for tuning in. And as I tell you every episode, stay safe out there.